Oh, my. You know,
Makes you feel old.
it makes me, no, like I'm preaching to the choir, for goodness sakes. I mean, what am I going to tell these people that they don't already know? My worst fears were realized when Crane walked in. And I'm an infant compared to him, for goodness sake. Frank Ford's sitting over there smiling, or at least I think you're smiling. I mean, come on. But as long as you want me to be here, I can give you a choice. I got the 4-hour edition, which will be made into a movie and a book. Of course, the book will sit on the shelf next to that by Larry King on one side and Merrill Reese on the other. I think Clark's going to read a book first, of course, and then write one. We could all write books here. I know all of you. It's an unfortunate thing. You know me and I know you. And there's a camaraderie and a unique position here in that we are really members of the same fraternity and sorority, if you will. We're all in the same business one way or another, and there aren't many of us. And in this particular case, looking at this room, there aren't many of us around. I do have a few things, though, I think that I'd like to pass on, only because they did happen to me, and I did get into business when I graduated in 1950. And Musser, what were you in 1950? You were a freshman at Syracuse?
I was, no, that was way before that. I was still in high school.
What do you mean, way before? Jesus!
I was listening to the Phillies.
You were listening to Phillies, yeah, I know, here we go. But I tell you what, we'll start with this. My first job in radio, and of course that was network radio at the time, I read the spot on the 6 o'clock news. And the 6 o'clock news, of course, was a high-paying job. I didn't do the news, I just read the spot. But my job, the studios were located on the 5th floor of the Low State Theater building in beautiful downtown, my hometown, Syracuse, New York. At 20 of 6, yes, Gene, where you used to work, I would meet the elevator at about 20 of 6 and escort the 6 o'clock newsman, a guy named Glenn Williams, to the studio. I had to because he couldn't see his way down the hall. His wife had deposited him on the 1st floor and sent him up the elevator hoping it wouldn't stop in between. I remember he drove a Hudson Terraplane, as I recall. No one ever has those cars anymore. But I would hand him the script, which someone had typed up, and he would sit down, and never having, seen it before, or having proofread a damn thing, he would then go on and do a 15-minute newscast that was absolutely brilliant. He was an old-timer, as they say, one of those guys who worked for the newspapers before they got into radio in those days, and they drank a little bit, but they could handle it. And that was my introduction to radio. Then the Korean War came along, and I spent 4 years in the Air Force, and I finally get out and I get back to my hometown, and sure enough, same station, different call letters now. The job is there, but now they're television as well because the TV station had bought them out. And I am now going to do the 11 o'clock sports on WHEN television. I'm going to do the Syracuse Chiefs baseball games, a AAA farm club in those days of the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, all I can tell you is, and many of you might relate to this, is that doing the 11 o'clock sports was an adventure, particularly when you were doing a baseball game at the same time, literally. The ballpark wasn't that far from the station. There were nights when I would do the ball game live from MacArthur Stadium, and I would have a little camera with me. And if I thought something good was going to happen, I'd fire up the camera. You could hear the sound, but there was no sound on the film, and hope to get a run, a hit, an error, something or other for the 11 o'clock sports. They would come pick it up ahead of time, put it in the soup so that when I got there, the stuff was out and could be edited. In the meantime, when I got back to the station, I ripped off what was at least 500 yards of Western Union ticker and got the ball scores. What did I do with the ball scores? I went into the studio where I had a sandwich board. Remember the sandwich boards? Where you put the individual numbers in? I did that. I got the whole show ready. No problem at all. Of course, 3-4 innings, a little late, but what the hell. And then I would do the show. Oh, by the way, I would edit the video ahead of time, hoping, of course, that something could happen. Rip off the wire, AP, UP, whatever, and get some stills out of the wire photo machine. Because in those days, we all remember 5 minutes of news, 5 minutes of weather, and 5 minutes of sports, all brought to you by a sponsor. You were sponsored in those nights. And it was wonderful, but sometimes you had to do your own commercial. Because we didn't have teleprompters in those days. Do you know why? They hadn't invented teleprompters. We didn't have videotape in those days. Do you know why? They hadn't invented videotape either. So the only video you saw was what I had shot at the game the night, that very night. 1 play, 2 play, 3 plays, whatever. But many times I didn't have a chance to take a look at the copy of the spot that I was going to. 3 nights a week I was brought to you by Peel Brothers Beer, Bert and Harry Peel, Bob and Ray's Voices. Recall? Hey, now I'm in friendly territory. But the other two, I had to hold up a can of oil, Tidal, and do a spot. How tough can that be? Well, there were no teleprompters, and there was no holding a cue card. Not a problem for me. I took key words, as I call them, and taped them up on the camera somewhere. And that thing worked for about 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I can't remember how long. Until one day, I walk in, I look up, and between the news and the weather and the sports, they had moved the camera. And there I am, holding up the can and nothing to go with. I found out what flop sweat meant. I found out what happens when your brain goes absolutely numb. My whole life flashed before me. I mumbled whatever I did. I finally got through it. I literally ran from the studio, went home, and my eyes were open all night long because I figured, here it is. A brilliant career, which will never happen, and everybody in my hometown knows that I am the village idiot. I'm serious. I mean, I thought it was all over. I got the paper the next morning for fear I would open up and see right across the banner of the Syracuse Post-Standard, "Did you see that television show last night?" But I survived. How? I don't know. I moved on. I went on to Buffalo and came on to Syracuse. But I was working television. Remember, these were the early days of radio, or of television, and it was also a time when radio was just kind of throttling back. I want to double back to my moments in Syracuse, where I said I did baseball. I did live baseball games of home games. Now Ronald Reagan and I have something in common. There are a few of us left. Seriously, does anyone know of anyone other than Ronald Reagan and me or I?
Harry did him.
Harry did him? Harry Callis? I'm so sorry you're here. We did recreated baseball games off of a Western Union ticker. Okay? A little box with a Western Union ticker and an operator right there, clickety click, 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 clickety click, and he would hand me a sheet of paper with half an inning on it. Half an inning, 1 B, 1 S, 1 strike, everything in shorthand, and that was it. Where the ball went, how it got there, fly ball, whatever it was up to me. And of course, all you need are 2 sticks. Hit them together. People didn't catch on to the fact that if it was a foul ball, I never did that. Only if the ball was hit. I'd hit the desk once in a while if there was a foul ball that came up and hit the top of the press box. Everything was going real well until halfway through the season or something. By then we had graduated to a printer where you had the tape, and I was right up next to the tape. I close out an inning with the Chiefs with 2 runs, 3 hits, da-da, and then the summary comes through, the Chiefs with 1 run, 3 hits, da-da, to which I say to the operator, find out what is the problem. So while the commercial is on, he fires back, and here's the reply he got, which I haven't memorized but will never forget. This was in Richmond, Virginia, which had just been introduced into the International League. I'm terribly sorry. I am a woman, and they will not allow me in the press box. I am getting this information from someone who is shouting down to me what's happening on the field. What the hell? How can you argue with that? So what did I do? I invented a run, of course. No, I'm sorry. I took a run back. I didn't score a run. However, it worked out. The game ended okay, but if you heard the broadcast and you read the paper the next day, you had no idea what the hell went on. But from that moment on, I learned something. Never get ahead of yourself. Never even stay even with yourself. When I pulled that, it had to have a loop on it that reached down to the floor and up into my hand, and I knew I was that far behind in the ball game. God forbid something would happen. You know, the usual thing, the dogs on the field and the rain's coming, all this kind of stuff. These are all true stories because you got interrupted occasionally. But the wonderful thing about the Western Union operator, and Andy will back me up and so will Gene, down the street on the corner was a place called the Wood Hotel where people used to go to eat. And, well, eat. Yes. And there were a lot of Western Union operators around who worked in the area who would listen to the radio in the bar, and of course they could read the ticker. That was their business. And they would always catch some unsuspecting guy from out of town and bet him on the balls, strikes, hits, runs, and errors. And no one ever caught on. So that's how I started. I started in the early days of television when we didn't have all of the equipment, and in the last days of radio. And then I come to Philadelphia, and I'm here maybe 6 or 7 months over at what's then WFIL. Yep. Is that correct? AM, maybe FM, and television. And I run into a couple of reprobates named George Finkel and Larry Cooper. And they say, hey, we got something. So what the hell are you doing? So we're going to open up a station, a UHF television station. Now, I didn't want to admit I didn't know what the hell a UHF television station was, because I thought they were all UHF television. I mean, you know, UV, what difference does it make? So there's Finkel over there, and he and Cooper, they said, we're going to do a lot of sports. Okay? I said, wow, this is it. They were located on beautiful Mermaid Lane, the site of an experimental station, I believe, for RCA. Is that correct? Philco. Whatever. Where, hey, the rats were bigger than the dogs in the neighborhood. Forgetting all of that, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. We did sports like no other station in America. We invented Big Five, basketball, doubleheaders, because we did every single game, every single night. We did 76er basketball. We did college football. We did Philadelphia
Soccer.
We did soccer, right? And we did they were the Spartans, and then we did that team from Pottstown, Firebirds, then the Bulldogs, and all that. It was wonderful. The only problem was we were a little short financially. We were doing things that no other station in America was doing, and we didn't know it. Seriously. We did an NBA championship game, Game 6 of the NBA championship between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Golden State Warriors, or San Francisco Warriors out of the Cow Palace. And George can back me up. If he doesn't, I'll kill him. The only way we were able to broadcast, the network wasn't going to touch it. It was a weekday game, and they only did weekend games. And we decided we're going to do the game, and we're going to drop it off around the country down the line in order for somebody to pick up the bills so that we could at least break even. I think Detroit, Chicago, New York, somebody. Milwaukee. Yeah, and we did. We just broke even. An NBA championship game. That's how it was televised by us. We were the pioneers. All right. So we run into hard times, and then finally there was a group of UHF stations owned by a guy named Overmeyer, who starts a little network, and he's in Atlanta, he's in Pittsburgh, he's in Cincinnati, he's out in San Francisco, and he buys Philadelphia, and now we become a United Broadcasting or something. U.S. Communications. Frank Reichel. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You forgot
Things-
bullfights, Al.
No, we did the bullfights, yeah. We had the best ratings in town on a station you couldn't get unless you had a separate antenna, because we carried the bullfights. Seriously. We found many years later that the bullfights were done in a studio in North Jersey.
How the wrestlers used to bring the tapes to us for,
Yeah, well, yeah, we had wrestling in it, but what happened was our ratings dropped off considerably after we went color. Remember? Because people didn't want to see bullfights in color. Black and white was okay, but color didn't work for us. Oh my. But now comes the irony of it all. They sell the stations eventually, and one thing happens to another. The station in Atlanta was sold to a guy who was in the outdoor advertising business. A guy named Ted Turner. Ted Turner had vision. We are responsible for cable television. George, right? You and me and Barry and the rest of those idiots that ran that station and weren't smart enough to know what was going on. He took that baby and put it up on the bird, sold Atlanta Braves baseball to the world, and he became what he became. But it all started literally with us in Philadelphia because we were the first to do it. All sports all the time as much as we possibly could. Long before ESPN was even dreamt about, we were doing it here in Philadelphia. We were the pioneers, again, the pioneers.
MTV.
Yeah, well, MTV as well, that's correct. We did have studios, we had closets, so we had to occasionally do our afternoon cut-ins on the movie in these little closets with these large lights that were left over by Philco. And one afternoon, I passed out on the air, which was a first, but no one knows about it because why? We didn't have the tape rolling. We did the Phillies games, and then we did the highlights after the Phillies games. You know how we did the highlights? One play at a time, because that's all we could do. Those monster reels had to be re-racked all the time and everything else, and I'd have to ad-lib until we could get it cranked up, set the whatever they were doing to get the next play, and we did it one play at a time with the highlights. And I'm thinking back now, my God, was it that long ago? Today you could do an entire game in 5 minutes, as you know. But in those days, it was considered breakthrough, and it was done here in Philadelphia.
At Channel 17.
At Channel 17, and you were a part of it as well. And then I was lucky enough to get a call. At the time, I didn't think I was lucky enough, but I got a call from a guy named Dave Salzman at Channel 3, who said, why don't you come on over here? We got a spout open. We're bringing in some people, and we're going to do things here at Channel 3. We've got a young lady coming in from Houston, Texas, and a guy from Louisville, Kentucky. Well, the young lady from Houston, Texas was Jessica Savage, and the other guy was that big voice boob from Louisville called Mort Krim. And there was Vince Leonard and Bill Custer and me. And we were together for 5 years with the Eyewitness News team. And with no exception, and I know everyone here, and I've worked with a lot of you guys, but honestly, we were Camelot. We didn't know it until later, but we were. We were as good as it gets, and the reason was because we liked each other enormously. Last year, we had a reunion out in Vail, Colorado. We went out last summer and drank a toast to Jesse and spent a week together and had a wonderful, wonderful time. The best 5 years of my life. Everyone was leaving, so I figured, what the hell, I'll go to Chicago, which I did, because they wanted to pay me a lot of money, and I'll give all of you advice, you who are just about ready to get into the business. Never take a job because of money. Ever. Management will always agree to that, of course, but please, don't take a job because of money. It never works out. I come back to Philadelphia. I am invited back to Channel 10, where now I am working with one of my heroes, Herb Clark. Because when I first got to town, I turned on the television set, I don't know one from the other, and there's Herb Clark on the air doing the weather, John Facenda doing the news. Was it Brookie doing the sports at the time? Must have been. Yeah? Oh, no, Whitaker had already gone to New York. And I felt like, hey, I'd really love to work for those guys, and eventually got a shot at it. But as I look back on it now, as I said, we kind of started things without really knowing what we had and how close we had come to being the giant that Ted Turner became if we only had people with vision. We would have stayed at Channel 3. Maybe Jessica would have gone, I think, in all probability, but the rest of us would have stayed. If it were not for one person, wherever he is, may Alan J. Bell choke on his dinner this afternoon. I tell you what, because of that move, he screwed it up. He broke it up. Westinghouse Broadcasting lost hundreds of millions of dollars and eventually went out of business. Not that we were the only reason, but boy, think about it, we could have helped a lot with the money that we would have made in those years to follow, which never happened. But those were the great years. So I came very close to greatness in all kinds of places, but most of it here in Philadelphia. And then I retired. Wait, first NBC takes over after my 18th year, Herb's 36th year at Channel 10. How many years? Gene Crane's 55th year at Channel 10. But NBC came in and they brought in this guy from Chicago, and he took a look at everybody, and if you had white hair, you were gone. Except for Gene, he was in Mexico at the time, and he didn't know he worked for the company. But a guy named Gene Lothry was very good to me and everybody else, and he helped us along and gave us some fairly long-term paper, and we were able to weather it out until it was time to say at my 70th birthday, the hell with it all, I'm done. And I was, until I got a phone call about 3 months after I had, quote, retired, and a guy named Dave Koski of the Philadelphia 76ers calls up and said, let's have lunch. Maribella's. I said, okay. So I got an idea for a show. It's called Where Are They Now? I figured he was talking about me. And we did it. And it played on something called Comcast Sportsnet, which had just gone on the air. And the people from Comcast Sportsnet called me up one day and said, hey, what are you doing? Well, what am I going to do, play coy? I'm retired. What are you doing? We got, we need people occasionally fill in on post-game stuff. Are you interested? So yeah, it's a couple of years ago. So now I got an interview show 5 days a week. I do the post-game on the Sixers and the Flyers, third of the time. I do a monthly show called Sports Classics. And I work in a building where the only thing they do is what I do. For the very first time in my life, sports means something. And you don't have to spend the day arguing with a news director or a general manager or a program director about a crew, about time on the air. Because on the stone it's going to say, 30 more seconds, please. That's what I've requested. That's for those days when I almost got an ulcer, just fighting for more time on my own station. What they're doing now is just the beginning. They bought Home Team Sports just a short time ago down in Baltimore, and they're growing to become Comcast Sportsnet, and Comcast itself will become the largest operator in America in the not too distant future, certainly in all sports in every one of the major markets. It's growing. I was in the end of radio, the beginnings of UHF, actually the early days of VHF as well, and I'd like to think the early days of what is now cable. I have had all the bases to touch, first, second, third, and now I'm home. I have been an extremely fortunate guy. For whatever reason, it's maybe because I'm a good guy, I don't know, but I'd like to think it's because I know what I'm doing, and I've done it pretty well for a long period of time. I do this because I love to do it. And that's the only thing, as I said, I can wish to anybody. I have finally hit the senior tour in broadcasting. And that's my story. And I am most thankful to all of you for listening here and nodding. And only nodding, not because you're nodding off, nodding because you understood what I was talking about. Because there aren't many people other than this group where I could go out and tell stories like this and have them at least understand what the hell it was all about. It was a great ride. And before I say my goodbye, over there, as I look and I look and I look and I talk about Channel 17, wait a minute. Channel 17 wasn't just sports, okay? Channel 17 was also Wee Willie Weber, who took every afternoon, played the cartoons, and became a hero in everybody's house. Willie, you're a giant in many ways. I want people to recognize that fact. And to all of you, and I can name all of you individually, it's so nice to see you. And may we do this more often. Next time it's someone else's turn. Someone who is perhaps a little older than I am. I don't know how many of you will qualify, but at least Gene Crane, you're next, okay? Pat, thank you very much.
We still have a few minutes if you have some questions, and I'm sure there are some questions you'd like to ask of Val.
Yes. Lila, yes.
Lila, do you know where Jim Gerhardt is?
Jim Gerhardt, last I heard, was working at a radio station somewhere in Trenton, New Jersey. It is Trenton, okay.
101.5, and they're on television every morning. You can see them.
They simulcast?
Yeah.
Honestly?
On cable.
On CNN.
On CNN?
Yep.
CNN every morning.
CNN up there in Trenton, New Jersey.
Channel 8.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
I don't get it on my set. Do I? Will I get it on my set?
You might not get it in Philly. You get it in Jersey.
You get it in Jersey, but not in Philly?
You get it? Oh, then you get it. Okay.
That is absolutely incredible.
He wears a baseball
One of the
cap
brightest,
with phones.
one of the brightest men I ever knew in my life. Funny as hell. He should have written the great American novel. He really should have. You know, we were disciples of Gene Vassell, both of us.
I started at WFIL a week before you, George.
Well, hey. And when I came to town, who were the guys that I listened to? I listened to those guys on WIP. Not those sports idiots. I mean the real pros at WIP when I was in town. Because they played my kind of music. And they're still around, these guys.
I think he got
George Walsh went to Louisville. See what you're going to find out here today, for God's sakes, you know, and I'll just pass along the information. Hey, by the way, this is, I also want to tell you, you probably know, but just you don't, Andy Musser is finishing up with the Phillies this year after 25 years? 26 years. And will be, from this point on, the moment representing Anchor Steam Beer and Distillery. And it's Andy's turn in the box next year to tell some stories that have never been told about Whitey and Harry and Wheels and the rest of those guys at Veterans Stadium. Because if somebody wrote that book, that would be a bestseller, you know what I mean? Yes.
Andy is still doing Sunday Phillies.
Andy, I was about to say, he's still doing Sunday Phillies at home. He ain't no dummy. You know what I mean? Sunday at home, you can't beat it with a stick. Yes.
Is Vince Leonard still?
Vince is now in Las Vegas, Nevada. His Sun City. He moved from the mountain in Phoenix because there was smog in Phoenix. And things were getting to the point where they had traffic jams in Phoenix. So he and Frankie took off and now live in Las Vegas and Sun City.
Is he still working?
No, he's not working, but he took up the game of golf. He only plays on days that end in a Y. Yeah, Bill Custer retired, is living in Denver, Colorado. Writes a weekly column in the Denver, whatever they call it, Post, is it? Yeah, on gardening. Herb Clark is still doing some crap on KYW radio on gardening too, aren't you? I love to pull his chain.
I sell my old strip Swift to Bill Cosby.
Okay, that's right. I would love to pull my chin. Oh, that's wonderful. Gene Crane is still on the air. How many years is it now?
110.
Yeah, that's close.
This is my 61st year in the business, but I've been at CAU 56 of those.
You have, look at the treasures that you have in this town. I'm very serious. We should, a plaque for sure, a monument possible. Oh, I'm serious. I mean, come on, they build ballparks with ball players in the front. Channel 10 ought to put a statue of you on that front lawn of theirs.
My contract runs to 2004.
Al will only allow white pigeons, too.
But we're all, as I said, together in the same biz, and we all understand each other, and we're extremely proud of everything that we've done in this market, and should be, because it's been a fantastic, fantastic time working with you, working alongside of you, or sort of working against you. It made no difference. You're all my friends. I thank you very much.